like trying to undermine law enforcement. I don't know what operating system people are working off. There's a lot of confused people. So we really have to I guess that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build a new ideology. We're trying to create a new paradigm. I see so I see the other guys are on. I'll let them interject a little bit.
Yeah, I think maybe I know I missed a little bit of it with X spaces always being buggy as hell. Hopefully y'all can hear me now. I think we should be good.
Loud and clear, Seth.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I think the only thing I'll really add in, and we can keep rolling, is just that I think one of the beautiful things too is we actually can use technology to allow us to build ideologies and communities that simply would not be available and would be repressed otherwise. I know we're going to touch on some of those tools here today, but also stay pretty philosophical at the same time. So going to be interesting to chat more about it, but it is an exciting time that we have the tools available to really gain some freedom we wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I'll just speak to this as well. So obviously, people are here because we see a future for preserving and even expanding the sphere of human freedom using cryptography. That is the original cypherpunk vision. That's the vision of having sovereignty for individuals and communities, not just nation states who can make decisions on our behalf or large corporations without us having any say in those decisions. Institution.
Yeah, Harry, we're losing you a little bit, my friend.
Level, I think cryptography. Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe just kill the video.
Very important. Can you still hear me? The video feed.
Yeah, it's cutting in and out a little bit. If
You see.
if it
Anyways,
continues, you can
I'll just
drop the
check
studio.
back in. I'll
Yeah, so I'll just also add that we started using this other tool called Radical. But it's not like Radical with CAL, it's CLE, which is a P2P kind of code host. So pretty cool. It's a bit flaky, but it has also support for Tor. So, now that people can actually have true censorship-resistant code hosting, which is also like anonymous. It protects the authors of the code. Obviously, in the Tornado Cash case, what happened was one of the things that the law enforcement went after was that you guys wrote the code knowing it will be used to anonymize money. So that's one of the ways they've actually, it used to be believed, and this goes back to like the PGP case with Philip Zimmermann, where in the 90s, cryptography was like, when cryptography first came out, it was like so mind-blowing because everybody was like, whoa, we can build like truly privacy-preserving spaces on the internet and nobody can go into them. Law enforcement can't go into them. And the government did not like that. The government classified that as a munitions. They said, like, if you write code and you put that code on the internet to do cryptography, you will go to jail because you are exploiting a military munitions. And there is an activist. He was, he was an anti-nuclear activist, which is Philip Zimmermann, and he was like, no, they're putting my friends in jail. We need to be able to communicate so we can protest, blah blah. We can get the word out. So he wrote PGP. He put it on the internet, and that became a big deal. It took up like the next decade of his life. And I had the honor of meeting Philip Zimmermann, with Harry, and I was on magic mushrooms, and Philip Zimmermann, I was just with Harry, and Philip Zimmermann walked in the room, and I didn't even know he was coming. I was like, oh, that's Philip Zimmerman. Oh my god! And he sat down next to me, and I couldn't talk because I was just so shocked. I was like, and he was just like Philip Zimmerman. But anyway, eventually I did ask him. I asked him about that case, and he found out how to hack it. He found out how to hack the bureaucracy, which is he printed the code of PGP in a book, which is protected under the First Amendment in the US, and you can sell that book internationally. And so anybody could buy the book, and the book contains the code of PGP, and you could scan the book. And so then the idea became, and so they dropped the case, and cryptography became widespread. And even later in the 90s, Bill Clinton, the Clintons, yeah, they tried again to do a war on cryptography. They started pushing, they're like, oh, all cryptography, it needs to be backdoored, we need to have a special US government access. And there was a big fight over that as well. But we arrived to here. It hasn't been without a struggle. The reason why everybody has cryptography, it's like a very powerful tool, such a powerful weapon that we have. Anyway, it was assumed for a long time that people who write code, we're just writing, it's like writing a book or something, it's a speech, and you put it out there. And look, we're seeing now in the UK, we're seeing now globally, even speech itself is not protected. You say in the UK, you hold up, even non-speech, like literally people in the UK holding up a blank sign at a protest, and the UK government goes, you're not allowed that. You made a post on Facebook criticizing the government. We're going to arrest you. We're going to actually charge you. They actually started building in the UK new jail centers, like massive jail centers, because they were like, oh, our jails are going to be full of capacity because of these new people we're going to have to take in for these speech offenses, which is crazy. So anyway, but that's one thing. The other thing was code. We always thought that code, you're just writing code, you're just putting that self-expression on the internet. They can't persecute you for that. Turns out they are now. It shows how desperate power is. Like we're heading into a new multipolar world order. We're seeing what's it called, the Thucydidean trap, where one great power is declining and another new power is rising, and the inevitable conflict that comes at that. So all these governments now, the ground is shifting. There's quicksand, and they're resorting to more and more desperate measures. We saw today the Pavel Durov thing in Russia. They say that picture where he's going like that, and he's like basically saying, "Oh, fuck you, Russia," because they actually declared. It turns out he's got his sperm in a sperm bank in Russia, and they declared it like a terrorist thing, and so now they're like demolishing his sperm because it's like a terrorist asset. I know, weird, right? But anyway, that was because of the speech thing. Man, there's like a heat wave in Europe. We can talk about them banning AC, but anyway, that's a different topic. But the speech is. So the code we saw with Tornado Cash, now they've been like persecuting the Tornado Cash devs, and one of the big things was like, yeah, you wrote that code. Let's be real here. You know what that code's for, and you wrote that code and you put it out there, even though you're not controlling the code. I mean, crazy, right? The guy literally, Roman Storm, he wrote code that was uploaded to Ethereum, a decentralized world computer that anybody can operate. And, they said, and he was like, well, I don't control it. And they're like, not good enough. Doesn't matter. You knew what people can do with that. So that's why for DarkFi, it was like, we saw that. We looked at all these things. We're like actively observing how they're persecuting people at the forefront of this fight. So we were like thinking, and so that's one of the things we've been careful is to avoid authorship of code, so they can't eventually come along and say, hey, mister, come here, mister. You wrote that code, didn't you, mister? You wrote that code. You know what the fuck you did. And like, was me. I didn't do nothing. He's a sweet boy. He didn't do nothing. That was like our strategy. And so imagine that's why we went to a refuge, which is Codeberg, from GitHub, because GitHub ain't providing that. GitHub is like, fully, locked in, with helping the law enforcement, whatever. They're not going to protect you. The opposite. It's a honey trap. And code. There's all these like, fly by night, alternative code host repositories, and they're like, yeah, fuck the corporations, man, and the rich people. Come here, we protect freedom. We've got to fight the fascism. So we're like, okay, we're going to you guys. It turns out they're like, no, we don't like people making money. That's capitalism. That's bad, because they're communists, right? But not even like the cool communists that like want to like do like a proper revolution, like the woke kind of commies I'm talking about. They take EU money, that have no soul, have no what do you call it, like no authenticity in their struggle. They're like, yeah, the EU, man. Anyway, so like that's why we need. A lot of people are like, oh, why do we need like anonymous, decentralized, free speech code hosting? It seems so random and niche. But there's a project out there, Radical. Just wanted to throw out there, and I was like, okay, that is like actually a pillar which is going to enable us to build and to not be persecuted. So, we've been trying that. It needs work. It has support for Tor, so it gives us our anonymity. So that's pretty cool. We've been experimenting with that this week.
How do you? Just a quick question for you.
I wouldn't. Does my microphone work now, or is it still dead? Yes.
The mic
No?
works. You are
Okay.
echoing a little bit.
Okay. Cool. Well, then. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. So I mean, I think in terms of the attack on coders, I mean, we've been through several rounds of this. So the original case, was when public key cryptography came out. It was attempted to be banned. I learned cryptography from Ron Rivest over at MIT, and he said that his early papers, when he was trying to publish them, the NSA would say, "Don't publish that," and then it gave us the first working implementation of RSA, and suffered a lot, right? So he was heavily persecuted. And we really owe, I think, the first generation cryptographers, in particular Daniel Bernstein, who basically created, at least in the United States, this precedent that code is a form of speech and therefore protected by free speech laws. As a graduate student, he created an encryption program called Snuffle, which is a great name. It was put on, they tried to ban its export, and he sued them, representing himself, and won. And that's where we get this kind of code is speech um, adage or truism that we all believe in. And I do think it's true that code is a form of speech, and that if we believe speech should be free, and I definitely do, I think people, including people I disagree with, should have the right to speak freely and anonymously at that. That also should be the case with code. And there's a very long history of anonymous whistleblowing, not just WikiLeaks, but going on, since like sort of the beginning of the American Revolution, and if not before, critiques of the church and the Middle Ages and so forth and so on. Now, when you come to code hosting platforms, it is definitely true that GitHub it's owned by Microsoft. It is what 99% of programmers use. What we've suggested doing, which we do at NIM, is we have our own private, because again, Git's really useful, but it's free software. So we run our own Git instance, and then we mirror that to GitHub. Now, maybe we should stop mirroring to GitHub, but even if GitHub took us down, we would have a GitLab instance. Now,
But you
that
see,
GitLab instance,
running your
let
own
me
Git
finish,
instance is
Amir.
an issue.
Yeah, but then whatever, Radical's not going to save you, man. Like okay, so cool. I run my own GitLab instance, but that's identified by me. Let's say I want to publish code anonymously. Now, if you look at Tor delivers a very weak level of privacy. First thing, it's primarily US government funded. Second thing, if you've done anything with the dark web and whatever you've seen, onion site after onion site going down, these are due to incredibly easy attacks on distributed hash tables that have been going on for a number of years. So Tor provides IP hiding. It hides your IP address. It doesn't actually make you anonymous against an adversary such as the US government. I think this is a big misconception that's very widespread. It's unfortunate. It would be nice if we had better technologies. NIM is trying it. Other projects are also trying it. And we need more and more people working in this space because I think while Tor was anonymous against large scale adversaries, kind of when it first came out and made a bunch of design choices in the 90s that made a lot of sense, it makes less and less sense as time progresses. And government surveillance and private surveillance in the Palantir has kind of grown exponentially while anonymizing technologies have grown less so. And what I find, and I just want to speak about cryptocurrency. So there's a reason why cryptocurrency is hated, right, by a lot of people. And it's because it is viewed to large extent as a scam. And it is actually true, I would say about 99% of cryptocurrency projects are scams. People have lost a lot of money. A lot of projects have done very dubious things, thinking of FTX. Actually, hilariously, some projects that are closer to the government, such as FTX in the Biden administration, that were the most scummy and the most fraudulent in terms of what they did to users. But there's many, many, many more. Um, and so, how much percentage of that money went into producing software like DarkFi, like Logos, like BitChat? I mean, to be honest, a very small amount, right? And so, of course, like the majority of people when they hear cryptocurrency, they're just like, "Oh, what the hell?" Now that's the case maybe in Europe and the U.S. If you go into the global south, you do see actually huge adoptions, particularly of USD Tether for payment rails, but you don't see so much adoption of like privacy enhancing technology, mostly because those nation states are still fairly weak and don't have the surveillance capabilities of, say, Europe or the United States, although they're gaining. India's gaining, Russia and China, obviously massive surveillance capabilities, and we expect, South America and most nation states to eventually all of these surveillance capabilities will eventually come down because you can just buy them on the open market from Israel, NSO Group, private companies. I mean, that's what you see. You can align with China and buy Chinese surveillance tech, as we see in Iran, or you can align with the United States and buy kind of US Israeli surveillance tech. Now, another issue, if you look at what it would take. And so I still think it's very much an open project of what it would take to create really anonymous decentralized code hosting. If you look at Radical's history, Radical originally tried to launch on IPFS. IPFS raised tons of money via Filecoin. It does work. IPFS, to my knowledge, has been working off fairly. I've used it. Worked fairly well almost 10 years now. You have competing projects like Arweave or StoreJ that just shut down. Decentralized storage is one of the most prominent problems that cypherpunks face. When the cypherpunk movement first started, their primary enemy was the Scientology, trying to remove the records of the Church of Scientology from like email servers. And that's kind of what gave birth to things like the Eternity Service and these kind of which was, to our knowledge, the first use of the term decentralization in software in the early 90s, trying to say, how could we build a censorship resistant private data storage facility? And this is something that would be useful for WikiLeaks, it'd be useful for all sorts of people, human rights activists, journalists, code maintainers. But then if you look at it, Radical basically said, look, we tried to build on top of IPFS and it was too slow and impractical to use because code repos, I think just to quote Radical, change all the time. And so a content addressable store like IPFS is not a really solution. And so we have to I still think I think the two things that we should do as a community, and I know, obviously the financial market's not doing well, but we should fund more privacy enhancing technologies and we should encourage use of decentralization. and particularly and there are open problems like decentralized file storage, which are not actually tackled today. And I would like DarkFi's code base and NIM's code base and everything Cakewalt's code base to survive more and more repression, but they're not going to survive if the code, these kind of distributed code repos stay in their current state. So you really do need total decentralization of the code and anonymity against much larger threat models. And we've seen now, and I don't want to end on a negative note, but we've seen a lot of good stuff though happen, particularly, I mean, even in the last few weeks. So the Zcash Ironwood upgrade as the first time we've seen formal verification really used, I think, in privacy on a large scale. Happened pretty quickly. I was not expecting that. I thought it would take maybe a few months, if not a year, to formally verify the code base with the use of AI coding assistance. That seems to have sped up quite spectacularly. And so I do think that like we also are entering a golden era of coding where it's more and more possible for people who don't know how to code, and for people that are good coders to really go all the way and like build better formally verified cryptographic systems. And if we can do that, and I think we probably only have a short window to do it, we should do it like now. So that's kind of my take on the distributed code uh, repo topic.
I have just a quick comment to what you said, Harry. That's kind of anecdotal, and then maybe Seth has some comments on the decentralization of code bases, et cetera, maybe related to Cake. But just one of the things that I do for fun, I was telling Amir about this in person not too long ago, but I like to mod video games. So I started modding like a pixel-based RPG game. It was sometime last year when I started, and I needed some help with some aspect of the game code. Because when you code a game, it's just basically all text files. That's how the structure is, and I needed some help setting up some assets. And I asked the community on Discord, and I was so excited about the game and about how it mods. And I told them that I've been using Claude to help me get through some of the process, because some of the ways that video games structure it are very insular. Like the way that the code is built out, it's really unique to the game, and you have to really get to know it. And most people don't have the time or the energy to actually do that. And I told him I was having Claude help, and I told him a bit about my background, that I work in crypto and I work with a lot of hackers. That was like a red flag for those guys. They like immediately banned me from their Discord, and they started making fun of me for even thinking about using AI. And they said, "Oh, you're just trying to scam us out of our Bitcoin." So this is something else that's kind of interesting about our space. Working with technology, you would think that people who are interested in coding, like also engineers, likely use AI to some degree, but they literally kicked me out of the Discord server, basically mocked me, and then went on about their lives. So this is the kind of treatment too, I think, that people get when they are associated with leveraging any kind of AI technologies for coding. But obviously, it's being used in a professional manner now, in the context of blockchain, right? In the context of development for privacy preserving tech. So it's like just a crazy thing that happens. I just wanted to say that, maybe get Seth's take on the situation if he's up here as well.
Yeah, for sure. I can chime in briefly. Yeah, I mean, the decentralized hosting one is really interesting because there's like you need the ability to have your code be visible and have everyone be able to see all of your changes all the time. There is definitely a space for doing that anonymously, but there's also a lot of reason to want to know who's actually pushing code and who's maintaining a project and who is making changes, because there is a lot of trust associated with that. I mean, I know open source helps alleviate a lot of that. You want to you want to obviously be able to build it yourself, verify it yourself, hopefully have reproducible builds. But at the same time, you do rely a lot on who is actually maintaining this project, who has merge rights. Do I know this person, whether I know them as a NIM or a real person? Obviously, NIM is always preferred, but there is some space for that where like we need a way to preserve the code and have it always available. But like completely anonymous publishing, where even a pseudonym cannot be tied back to the code, often has serious trade-offs in terms of how useful that code is to other people in the world, outside of just the mirroring side of things, where obviously there's a huge need for that to be able to make sure that if Cakewallet's repo on GitHub gets taken down, obviously it cannot be the end solution that GitHub themselves can just decide one day Cake Wallet should not exist, and now no one has access to the code. Obviously, that cannot be the natural state. And yet at the same time, I know that people would not want to use Cake Wallet if suddenly they had no idea who was actually making commits, if there was no attributable author to someone that had some level of trust that they could verify worked at Cake Wallet, that sort of thing. But there's also different threat models for different projects. If you're talking protocol development, like Monero, for instance, that's going to look very different in terms of what sort of hosting provider solution you want and how willing you are to have people who are completely pseudonymous contributing to that. Like one of the primary contributors to Monero, as far as I know, no one in the Monero space has ever met them and has no clue who they are, even Monero core team members, etc. And that's a good thing. But we also still know him by a pseudonym. He's not publishing anonymously, he's publishing pseudonymously, so that we still know that that same entity is the one publishing those things. So it's always a little bit of a like interesting choice of trade-offs of what makes sense for this specific project, and protocols versus customer facing tooling often I think have a different set of trade-offs, a different desire for when it comes to decentralized or anonymous uh, code hosting, repository hosting, that sort of thing.
Nice. Thanks so much, Seth. Yeah, this is an interesting thing. When I worked with a previous organization, a cryptocurrency exchange called Cryptospace, I did some risk management, but we were developing a platform for peer-to-peer exchange, primarily with for Bitcoin and stablecoin trading. We had an internal, I can't speak to all the details, but we had an internal adversary basically get upset that things didn't precisely go his way, and he effectively absconded with the repo. Right? He just took he had the password, he had the keys and the access, so he can just go away with it. And then the CEO and the rest of the team, right? And you've just destroyed, right? You've just liquidated however many millions of dollars got put into developing that code and developing that platform. That was actually this is directly speaking to this problem, and it speaks to what Harry said as well, where we really do need a decentralization of the code base to prevent, because right, governments, corporations are one kind of actor, but there's also internal threats, there's random external threats that could jeopardize your code base. And if you don't have it properly decentralized, if you don't have the proper protections in place, well, then you're really just at the whims of the current structure of the system. And that's not a position that we want to be in. So 100% trying to figure out solutions for that. And this also goes a bit back to what Harry said as well. So this is the other facet. No one has really solved the like decentralized data storage component. And actually, this is probably one of the least spoken about or least talked about issues in the space. You have IPFS, you have these like Filecoin there, but there's always some type of trade-off that those platforms use that make it less than approachable, right? I think one of the issues too is that what ends up happening is there's like a centralization of the channel where those projects get funded, right? Or where those projects take on users. I know one of the issues in this space is like creating markets of scale, right? One of the at Logos we had Codex, which turned into Logos Storage. So we've been trying to work on this problem for a good amount of time. But one of the issues is you also have to figure out how to create a marketplace that people can effectively use that doesn't turn into the same zero sum dynamical race that affect any other kind of market, right? Where like, because who's to say that a Google or an Amazon can't come in and just like host a store, be a storage provider in that ecosystem, and then everyone is just using their storage services at their cheaper rate, or however they're deciding to work out their marketplace. So that's just one of the struggles. The other struggle, of course, using ZK to do proof compression and to figure out like all the erasure coding involved in being able to distribute the data effectively and protect the data. It's a Herculean task, and it's definitely something that we have to solve if we're going to actually be quote unquote Web3 and not have all the vulnerabilities that currently exist. And by the way, I want to take just a moment here. We'll reset the room, and we can. One of the things that Harry mentioned, I'd really like us to get into, is the situation with Palantir, thinking about social graphing. Harry mentioned that that's also a topic that's near and dear to our hearts here at Logos discussing. But before we get to that, I just want to mention briefly, guys, we're in here with Amir with DarkFi, we have Harry with NIM, and we have Seth with Cake Wallet. We're having a very nice discussion on the current state of affairs with regard to privacy, with regard to the surveillance state. And I think a big part of this, aside from giving you guys news, we're trying to determine the vectors at which we can push back against these particular systems, and we can develop proper cypherpunk tooling to protect ourselves in the most advantageous way possible in the current environment. So one thing I do want to say, that any of the ideas that we talk about, I forgot the disclaimers. I was so excited, I forgot the disclaimers. So any of the ideas, of course, that we talk about are not, they're the products of our own minds and not necessarily affiliated with any of our organizations. Just want to make sure to get that out of the way. This is our own unique views. Views are indeed our own. So maybe Harry, if you want to get into the Palantir thing, we can discuss that. At least I'm interested in talking about it. You guys are welcome to take it another direction.
Yeah, I would love to hear your take and
Sure.
Amir's and Seth's as well. So I think, I mean, again, there are different phases of history in this kind of fight for freedom using cryptography. In the first phase, because cryptography was a government secret, right? So public key cryptography was discovered by the UK government and hidden, and then rediscovered effectively by academics in parallel, who then gave it to the public in a kind of Promethean gesture. And that's a fundamentally that is the cryptographic revolution. And for many years, the US government tried to stamp it out because they wanted to have a kind of monopoly on secure cryptography, particularly the NSA and NIST. And we're still, I mean, we may still be seeing this. I don't think it's necessarily over. If you're familiar with post quantum cryptography, Daniel Bernstein, the same cryptographer that put forward the code is law case, has been fighting very dramatically the emergence of new US government standards around post quantum cryptography, which he believes may have a backdoor, maybe weakened in some fashion, or at least doesn't trust. And it's true that this cryptography, I'm not sure if as a backdoor is weakened, but it is true that the NSA recommended getting rid of traditional cryptography, including Daniel Bernstein and Tanya Long's Curve 25519, which most people use in the cryptocurrency world, minus the Bitcoin curve, which is a NIST curve that wasn't chosen. And Bernstein has claimed the NSA did come out and say, we would like you not to use non-post quantum cryptography. We want you to use only post quantum cryptography and only the US government standards. And that is, to be honest, a little suspicious, because post-quantum cryptography is still very much a field in development, and it's not quite clear if we have a quantum computer yet. And there's various debates about, and there's definitely evidence in the past that the NSA is subverting random number generation. Without random number generation, like, cryptography doesn't work. Now, what's happened, though, has been a big historical shift. And what's happened is, since around 2010, and definitely since 2015, Snowden revealed the NSA, and that was very useful, knowing that the U.S. does operate what we at MixNet World, who build anonymous networks, think of as a global passive adversary. It's an adversary that can copy all traffic on the internet and hold it for either machine learning or AI analysis, particularly social graph analysis, filtering and sorting the population into suspected dissidents and suspected criminals or whatever, and possibly even breaking that cryptography if a quantum computer is invented. And if a quantum computer is invented, it will almost certainly be by a government or a corporation closely aligned to a government, most likely the United States. Now, what's happened is, there was a big kind of uproar about the NSA, and the NSA people did push back against the kind of Patriot Act, so called, and these kind of unrestricted surveillance powers, claiming they were unconstitutional. So what actually happened is that private companies started getting all the surveillance contracts. So the concept of doing total information surveillance essentially was outsourced to the private sector. And this is very convenient for governments, because the private sector does not have even the minimal oversight that National Security Agency has, or in Britain, the GCHQ, or in France, I don't know, ANSI or whatever. Like, there's literally no oversight. And of course, also, like, private companies can pay programmers well, similar how blockchain companies used to be able to pay programmers to go away from Google. Good luck getting a programmer from Google to join the NSA. Pay rates are very low, government pay rates in the US. But if you're Palantir, you can pay them more maybe than they make at Google or even a blockchain company to work at Palantir, right? Maybe not as much as a AI frontier lab. So there's definitely like, so Palantir both attracts programmers who are very good at their job, who can operate in a kind of more startup style structure as opposed to government bureaucracy, and has zero oversight. Palantir's main project, I'll just want to outline it very quickly, is data fusion, formerly done by agencies. They take data from diverse databases, they create a digital twin of you and your actions and people around you and where you're at, and they then try to predict your behavior by combining different sorts of data. So, for example, they may combine data from airplane flights with facial recognition, with gait recognition, with medical data, with tax data, with your phone's geolocation, with data collected by flock cameras of your uh, license plate if you're driving in the US or whatever, train tickets in other countries that have functional public transportation systems. It's pretty crazy. And they do this by using a kind of perverse version of the semantic web technology stack, which is they can do data integration. Now, Palantir says we don't actually like have the data. They're not building personally a giant database of the entire planet. But what they're doing is they're connecting all of these databases together, and their kind of proprietary stack connects those databases. And then they build, because most people that work for governments and police and whatnot are not so bright, they need help. They produce like easy to use graphical user interfaces, so you can type in. And they apparently have taken over programs and helped design them, like XKeyscore X, which was revealed by Snowden, which is the program that allows kind of real time traffic analysis and tapping of internet traffic. So this says, if I'm using internet, I don't know, using my email, and they're going to try to tap that at the ISP level, at the telecom level, and get a real-time feed of everything I'm doing on the internet, who I'm chatting with, what code I'm updating, what services I'm using, combine that with phone data. It's pretty dangerous. So Palantir, and then, I think it is, and Palantir's trying to work with different nation states, right? They're trying to spread into Europe. They're actively working a lot with Israel and the Gaza genocide. They're actively, there's some pushback now from France and a few other nation states, but they tried to get their hands, I think, did successfully get their hands on all the UK government and medical data. And so to me, Palantir is actually a much more dangerous enemy than the NSA, because it has the same goal of total information awareness and surveillance, with the goal of behavior prediction and control, and it's in the private sector and therefore more likely to be successful. And furthermore, Palantir is sort of interesting because they're basically saying, look, we're going to have a giant war against Russia and China, and therefore we need to speed up AI weapons and the creation of fully or semi-automated AI weaponry. And this is exceedingly dangerous because you can see where this is leading, right? So, it's the next step after having surveillance cameras everywhere, we'll be having drones everywhere. And those drones will have, and they already do in many places, but it will slowly start happening inside of, even what I would consider core countries, will be armed and have weaponry. So the clear goal is the kind of extermination of populations using mass data analysis to identify dissidents or maybe even just unproductive or not needed people, and to get rid of them in this kind with these sort of large scale drone swarms and AI driven weaponry. And if you want to say, well, you can say, well, how is this possible? I mean, just look at Gaza, right? I mean, that could be the future of Oklahoma if we're not careful. And that to me is quite terrifying. And so I do think we have a ethical responsibility to build technology which can escape the surveillance nexus and get into the hands of as many people as possible. So that's it.
I have comments on this as well, but I want to let Chair it with your hand up, and then maybe Amir can comment on this as well, because Amir's actually been involved in warfare situations, so he can probably speak to some of this too.
And I have not seen action. But my question specifically about the Flock and Palantir stuff, over the past few weeks, month or so, there's been a surge of seeming awareness of the general public in the United States of like the existence of the flock cameras and then all this coverage of people disrupting and whatnot. Uh, Feels like a honeypot a little bit to me, because what better way can we identify exactly who might not be aligned with the flock cameras uh, existing than pushing and promoting all of these anti-flock camera people going out and destroying them, and then cataloging and documenting people who are liking and engaging with those posts and supporting. And all of a sudden, we have even total mass awareness of who dissidents and disagreeers might be. Now, am I being too paranoid or not paranoid enough?
I mean, all I would say is that it's honeypots are definitely possible. I mean, it's a situation which is well known in Lebanon, where Israel will drop a cluster bomb that looks like a soccer ball, so it attracts children from the house, so they kick the soccer ball and then they blow up. So yeah, of course, honeypots are possible. They're very dangerous. That being said, anything can be honeypot. So if if you become completely paranoid, it can be very paralyzing. I would just say, like, the example. I mean, I live in Switzerland, so I don't have the flock camera problem personally. But when I was shocked when I visited the United States, which used to, at least in comparison to the UK, not have so many surveillance cameras, because it's a very big country, to see this kind of mass deployment of privatized surveillance everywhere. And it does come home, right? So, the place where I saw most of the surveillance, I was visiting Atlanta, and they give a workshop on NIM with Freedom of the Press Foundation. And then what we saw, is that, after, it was awesome. People did like a operating system install. People did a workshop on using Zcash and Monero. People were using Cake Wallet even. So you saw, like, people were very interested actually in cryptocurrency and were very interested in graphene and defending their privacy. And then next thing you know, really 2 months later, someone gets nailed at the airport, uses a duress pin, wipes their phone, and now that's being used as destruction of property and as a federal felony charge in Atlanta, because the person is protesting, I believe, via surveillance. They figured out they were protesting some new police installation, like, called Cop City in Atlanta, like a fake city where cops can train for urban warfare. Which, the fact this is happening inside the United States and they're really planning urban warfare against their own population is pretty scary to begin with. And I would say probably worth protesting. Hopefully everyone in the U.S. sees this coming, but nonetheless, yeah, we're really seeing this kind of terrible stuff come home, and this is just very dangerous. And so again, what you see, the flock cameras are just step one of, like, a larger nexus. The first step is cameras. The second step tends to be drones, and then the third step is actual killings. So, you have arrest first, and then you have mass imprisonments, and then you have killings. And this is not a new phenomenon. We've seen it in communist countries and in fascist countries earlier, but it's definitely spreading. And I think there's no reason it's not going to come home at some point. We're seeing the early stages already.
So I have oh, go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, just quickly, I think something that stands out to me from that too is I feel like we do normally kind of throw out the, like, China as the blueprint thing, which is normal because they're normally ahead of the curve. But something fascinating that I've learned over the last decade or so is that the US has actually been, especially private companies, which ties into the Palantir concept as well. US companies have actually been building a bunch of the oppression and surveillance tooling that the Chinese state uses. There's a lot of ties between IBM, Dell, Cisco, other big tech companies who actually are marketing and building tools to detect if someone is from a specific religious sect or a specific people group that the CCP wants to target, and they're building out that tech and selling it to China. It's very reasonable to expect that that tech, if being built and sold to China, is something that's going to be perfected and brought back here. Now, I think I will kind of push back in that obviously we have much better constitutional protections, much better freedom to protest and speak out. We have a lot better state right now than you would be if you were in China and you were one of the Uyghur population or in in the Falun Gong or something like that, where you essentially have no human rights. Obviously, we do have some standing here in much of the West for now, but a lot of that we have to exercise now before we lose it, because many people are just willing to go with the flow, and if they're told these people group are bad or this specific protesting group are bad and they want to hurt you, or there's someone that we need to crack down on because they're problematic and they're going to destroy democracy. It seems like everybody claims everybody else is destroying democracy all the time. Those things can often be a cover that people are willing to go with. But I think I do also just want to kind of call it's not all doom and gloom too. I think a lot of times when you get into these conversations and they get philosophical and they call out a lot of the brokenness that exists in the system right now, it can feel like, well, why do we even try? Like, if Palantir is this big and this powerful, if Flock is something that we can't stop, kind of like, why do we even push back, or what's the point? So I do want to be kind of careful that we don't go into that, even as we do talk about the realism of the situation that we are facing and the potential future that we could be facing. And yet it's one that all of us on this call right now, on this space right now, are actively fighting against.
Yeah, speaking to this is actually really important what you said, Seth, and I want to speak to what Harry said just a little bit. But first, just a little bit of a note. We're gonna finish this line of thought. I'm gonna say something, and then I'm gonna let Amir add some commentary, and then we can move into a little question and answer segment as well. The first thing is, yeah, this conversation that we're having right now, we're definitely doing some analysis on the current state of affairs, and there is 100%, without doubt, a lot of really awful things happening. Harry did mention that at the very beginning of the space. And part of the onus is on us to analyze that, to provide the context of the situation. It's not necessarily just to fear monger or doom monger for the sake of it. I do believe that we're all working in our fields and on our projects for the purpose of trying to actively make the world a better place and trying to secure privacy and anonymity enhancing technologies for people to get out of having to deal with the situation. And we're definitely going to get more into that as we continue to do the sovereignty superspace. And the hope is probably in the next space we can talk more about the tech, more about the direction the tech's going to go. But something that excites me is also the fact that we're in the process of pushing and developing this parallel society ecosystem that's really modeled very directly after the Czechoslovak parallel polis movement, which effectively usurped power from government, took the power from the local government and the national government away in Czechoslovakia. Of course, this escalated in 1989 with the Velvet Revolution and the communist regime in Czechoslovak. The Czechoslovak regime actually abdicated power voluntarily, and very few people were harmed in the process. And this was through the activism that was embedded in the parallel society movement. So, what at the core of this, I think, in the language that we use now, is this notion of exit or exit ideology, where a lot of us are deigning to exit these systems that are corrupting, that at the end of the line have an objective to kill and to hurt people, which Harry pointed out. And by the way, I just want to validate too what Harry said, that this is a real serious imminent threat. So actually in 2014, the former NSA and CIA director Michael Hayden, he was actually boasting during a panel debate. He said, "We kill people based on metadata." Right? He said that bragging about his prior organization's capabilities. So the point that Harry was making is that through the process of data fusion that Palantir specializes in, this has actually enhanced the capability of the US government and other first world governments to act on information signals in a lot quicker fashion, right? And they do this, that they've done this in action. By the way, I'm actually working on an article right now for advocates of self-government, and the article is called "Undermining the Kill Chain." The term that we use to describe this, or the government uses to describe this, is a kill chain. So it's a chain that is based on this acronym that the military uses, especially the Joint Special Operations Command. It's called FEED. So FEED just means find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze, and disseminate. So the find phase actually leverages pre-existing surveillance technologies to surveil the population. This includes X key score, and this includes a number of different technologies to aggregate that data and to create these social graph and pattern analysis to go after people. And the what it results in, and this is the part that Harry was getting at, is the authorization of a strike package based on this type of analysis. What's most terrifying about this is that a lot of the strike packages in drone bombs or Tomahawk cruise missile strikes that the US military uses, they don't actually know the physical person on the ground. They don't have intelligence that the data is associated with the actual person that they're after, right? So this is called there. There's two types. One is a personality strike where they know the individual. The other is just called a signature strike. And by the way, all this information was provided by in 2015, I believe, the drone papers that The Intercept published. So this is just all leaked information from the Pentagon and from the government generally speaking. But a signature strike is just this social graphing. This is like Palantir's technology. This is all of their setup, their pattern recognition, combined with the government's data collection that they use to target individuals on the ground in the Middle East, right? So this is actually happening. This is important to talk about, even if it's scary, because this is the actual level of surveillance that we're up against. And as Harry pointed out, they can 100% turn this technology inward slash domestically against our normal populations, right? Or the populations of people who are involved in the government doing the strike. So it's not just, foreign, strange brown people getting killed in distant lands. And this is an actual threat and the reason we talk about this isn't for fear mongering or doom mongering. It's just to say that the time is now to develop and to work on this technology to prevent these organizations and governments from pushing forward a field with the development of their capabilities, right? I mean, they're already bragging about their ability to conduct these strikes, and that's absolutely terrifying, but it should also be motivating. It should motivate us and inspire us to act and to create the tech that prevents this right now. And this is something that, I'm personally interested in pushing forward. This is also why I've supported Harry's work, Amir's work, and what Seth and those guys over at Kate, because the financial component of this is relevant too, because that's all part of signals analysis and signals intelligence as well. Cool. All right, so the thing that I want to let Amir respond to this and get his take, and then we can move on to a question and answer segment where you guys can come up and chat. And then next time, don't worry, I promise we're going to get a little bit more, hopefully, pie in the sky optimist, and we're also going to think about ways that we can help circumvent or at least mitigate the attacks that are happening to individual sovereignty and of course to individuals' ability to live and exist without having to worry about an actual physical strike or attempt to harm their physical person, which is the reality, that like the final incarnation or apotheosis of this tech. Amir?
I think you guys articulate the threat, really well. We can talk about the solution phase. You wanted to move to that.
Cool, let's do it, man. If you have any thoughts, brother, you're welcome to hit it. Or Seth, you can get into it more if you want, or Harry, whoever wants to chat.
No, I think on that topic, I don't have a ton more. I know we could always get into Ironwood, the Zcash upgrade, and kind of talk through how that has been interesting this week. And maybe that's a little bit tangential though to what we've been covering so far. Or if we have people who are ready to hop up on stage and ask questions, we can definitely get into
I mean,
that.
I'd just say, full free speech, no compromise. If we build that and, everybody can communicate freely and do trade freely, all of that, I think there's like a latent demand for that. And if we build it properly, what the fuck are they going to do? They already showed that they're really annoyed by this. That's why they're going after people. In fact, them going after people is a sign that they're afraid, and it's a sign of where we should hit them hardest, because that's where it hurts. So we should keep doing more of that. Keep punching. You know, we're gonna break through. You know, we've got, and yeah, you talk about like Zcash Ironwood upgrade. Talk about this. The UX in privacy is going to get amazing. I'm sure of it. The Ironwood, it's, you know, it's really interesting because, you know, before there was this tension between, can we have anonymous crypto systems that are auditable? You know, obviously something like Bitcoin is completely transparent, it's completely on chain, and people go, therefore it's auditable. Versus, you know, something that's anonymous. You can't, everything's encrypted. You can't see what's happening. Formal verification is like, how to explain it. Formal verification is you mathematically prove that your system operate in a certain way, it obey a certain set of rules that you specify, and nothing else can break those rules. There's nothing else happening. There's no side effects, no hacks, whatever. But always, formal verification was very hard to write. It was like very specialized skill set. Not only did you have to be a bit of a mathematician, you had to be very nerdy mathematician. You had to, and it was really took a lot of time. So what's interesting is now the AI tooling can automate a lot of that very cumbersome, you know, tiresome work. It's very finicky, you know, like it's very frustrating to write that code. It's not like you just write code and it works. So what's interesting is that maybe we finally bridge this gap. You know, we have anonymous crypto systems which are fully auditable, which is amazing. Like that literally solve one of the biggest problems in privacy. And not only that, you know, something else I've been looking at is, you know, so typically when you have a privacy wallet, you open it, it has to sync with the network. And the reason it has to sync with the network is because it has to download all of the latest transactions and it has to scan through them, and it has to, every time it scans through them, it tries to decrypt them. It tries to see, is this transaction for me? And it tries to decrypt it. No. Okay, next one. Is this for me? No. Okay, next one, and so on. And maybe it finds one and it decrypts. Oh yes, this one's for me. Okay, there's my coins inside that encrypted transaction. So whenever you open your Cake wallet after a period of time, you know, it has to download 30,000 blocks, and you're waiting, and, you know, you want to send someone a payment, and, you know, it takes like a long time, and the internet is shitty, and, you know, it stops, and you get frustrated, especially when you're like, you know, you're in a foreign country, you don't have a SIM card, you know, you're using the airport Wi-Fi, whatever, and, you know, you need to get the money now, those kinds of situations. Anyway, it turns out now, there's like new techniques where literally you can, you know, through some magic, you can literally, you know, mathematics, which is a kind of magic, you can literally immediately see you have a transaction for you and which one it is, and you don't need to do that scan. So that vastly improves the UX of privacy wallets. You know, I think we're really moving towards like a kind of optimal privacy infrastructure. You know, I was just talking about, you know, that, you know, DarkFi, you know, we're very different to Monero or Zcash, which they're trying to build sovereign money, anonymous sovereign money, which is kind of like Bitcoin. We're kind of doing more like Ethereum type thing, where you have smart contracts, you have DEXs, you have DAOs, you have like a lot of infrastructure, a lot of apps, you know, financial rails, but anonymous, completely anonymous using ZK. There is new techniques coming out, you know, to do with IO, what's it called? Indistinguishability obfuscation, and, you know, FHE, and they're like a class of techniques which, you know, ZK or zero knowledge proofs, which is what DarkFi is, was already a huge leap from classic privacy cryptography. And now these new techniques are an even bigger leap forward. Like we literally basically will just enlarge the space to everything. Like anything can be built. We will solve like most of the problems. And but the thing is that IO exists currently, so that's like that was being the biggest leap, which was the for a long time was so IO is kind of like the holy grail generalization of everything anonymity in cryptography. If you achieve that, you basically achieve everything. But for a long time, it was questionable, like, can we actually achieve this? And it's been provably demonstrated. Yes, it's like constructible, but the construction is like very inefficient, take like terabytes, take huge amounts of like resources to use. Anyway, now there's been recently very drastic reductions in what those techniques require. So it's not yet a breakthrough, but it's kind of like how ZK was in its early days, where we're seeing these reductions, we're getting closer and closer to a kind of result where these things become really feasible. So I think it's very exciting. Like we will have like a huge arsenal to deploy. Not a lot, not a lot of people working on this. Everybody now is distracted by AI. A lot of crypto projects are fearful. They're fearful to really, utilize these things to the fullest. But we're here and we're building that stuff. The people here in this channel, and it's going to be exciting because we're anticipating a world. We're like moving into a very unique set of scenarios. You guys have articulated, Palantir, the AI data harvesting. What's going to be the refuge that we're going to have that's going to preserve our ability to resist and to expand freedom? Because look, in some ways, yes, governments are becoming more authoritarian, but in other ways, they're losing power. Their power base is weakening. New movements are springing up in society. New conflicts are emerging. So there is going to be a huge demand for this stuff because people are going to need it. People are going to need it in order to be able to fight, in order to expand the spaces of freedom, in order to struggle, in order to build the new era that's coming. So yeah, I think is super interesting. And we, as a crypto industry, we got so trapped up in this stupid game, which we learned from Silicon Valley. And, it became like, a hamster wheel where everybody's like, okay, you want to make a crypto project? This is the playbook, how you make crypto projects. And it kind of became so self-reinforcing that it kind of like became blinders on our field of vision. It has like, yes, it's like it's important to think about liquidity and how you successfully build a project, but it's also important to have a soul and to dream, because you're gonna miss the alpha if you're like so focused on your tunnel vision. You lose sight of the big picture, and that's kind of what's happened to cryptocurrency. People have lost their imagination. They left their imagination behind. There's like, this is an exciting time to be in. I'm excited. I grew up in the 90s, and I was in school and I was drawing pictures of the cities being flooded by tsunamis, bringing in whales and sharks. And I think everybody else was dreaming the same thing. What a boring time to be alive. It was the triumphalism of, Western neoliberal supremacy. And we were like, there must be more to life than this like zombie existence, Walking Dead. And it's no mistake that all the movies, apocalypse, disaster, blah, blah movies in the 90s, Aliens, Godzilla, freak weather, like all guys, just so many manufactured terrorists, like manufactured images, and people were like living in a dream world, and they were fantasizing about excitement, nightmare scenarios, snapping them awake from a dreamy existence. And that was what the Twin Towers was. I came home from school And you know, we in England, you need a TV license to watch TV. Yes, it's insane, but it's like what I grew up with, where you know they would come with the van on the weekends, and they would scan the neighborhood, and they would knock your door. They'd like knock your door, and we'd pretend not to be, and we'd hide behind the curtain. We'd be like, my mum would be, shh, pretend, don't let them know you're in. And we'd like peek the curtain, and we'd try not to move the curtain too much so they could see we're in, because you would get fined if you weren't paying a TV license, and they would harass you and knock your door. But and so we would never watch TV. And I came home that one evening, and you know my mum had this TV antenna, and she was frantically trying to attach it and like waving it around to get the TV transmission legally. And you know, we picked up the news channels, and you know, there's a lot of these buttons on the TV with 5 channels, you know, like click buttons, like psh, you know, like not digital or anything. And we were like playing all the channels non-stop, all the time, like for the entire like next few days. Were just non-stop talking about the Twin Towers collapsing. It was that big a deal. And my mum was going, everything's changed. Life is never going to be the same ever again. And it wasn't. Everything changed after the Twin Towers collapsed. This is the biggest event of our generation's lifestyle. The Zoomers today, they have like no clue like how big of like a what do you call it, like a you know, like where there's like a break in the old Civ, and then there's like the new Civ. It was literally like, it was like huge, you know. Um, so yeah, just imagine like that sleepy era, like our parents' generation. Like you literally could change nothing. You literally grow up, and your parents would be like, you have to go to university. If you don't go to university, your life is over. And what did you have? What options did you have open to you? To become a lawyer? You know, like my dad used to put on a fucking suit to go visit the bank manager, and he was so happy about it. It'd be like, he's like, yeah, they respect me in the bank. Can you imagine living that life? So anyway, we're in like a new era. It's an exciting era. It's a dangerous era. You know, it's an era where yes, they're like really clamping down, but that's a sign of weakness. You know, like the mask has come off, and everybody's questioning things now. Even like very schizo narratives are coming out, but that's part of the deconstruction of the truth paradigm. Is healthy. It's like how things regenerate, new things are born, new religions, new belief systems. So that's where we're finding ourselves. And you know, we're the cypherpunks. We can really be a pillar of this like new going forthness, and we have to tap into it and not be afraid of it. Not going like, oh, you know, we have to go back, guys, to normalcy. No, we need to embrace it. That's what cryptocurrency is really about. At its root, you know. So you know, go forth, like. So yeah, and yeah, they're you know they're using their, you know, that's what the US has done. You know, the US, they weaponized their control over the world. You know, remember the sanctions. Like the US literally used to control world finance, and they would say to countries like, you know, you're sticking your head up. I mean, look at Gaddafi. Look what happened to Gaddafi. Or look what happened to Thomas Sankara. Anybody would stick their head above the parapet, and they would like take them out. That's what happened. And you know, the US used their power to target countries, and eventually they overused it. They did it way too much, that they created an opposition, and those people banded together, and those people started to say, you know, well, you know, maybe this world finance system is not in our interest, actually. Maybe we need to pull out of that. And so that's where things are going to. And, you know, the liberals who controlled everything, they did the same thing with the woke movement. They tried to cancel people. I got cancelled, which is crazy, like, because I literally went to Syria. I fought in a feminist revolution, you know, anarchist, you know, decentralized Rojava, etc. And I came back to London, and the anarchists cancelled me. literally for no reason, just jealousy. A lot of very jealous people, slave-like people, and they're like, oh, we're the what do you call it? We're the like ones that are like culturally in the lead, and get arrogant and get what do you call it? Yeah, get arrogant and kind of tunnel vision, like very ignorant, and go, okay, you don't fit my dogma, you're going to be cancelled. That's what's happening. That's exactly the same kind of people in Codeberg that are cancelling us. And so, that's, they've done that so much that now they're losing. All these groups that before were dominant are losing their grip on power. And this is kind of what is also all this stuff to do with, surveillance, government authoritarianism. I mean, why do they really need that? The flock cameras are a really good example. Then they're like, yes, they have had a big role in like clamping down on crime, but then again, is that really everything? Is that really why the US has such big issues? Is because we don't have enough surveillance? Or is it like something else, the loss of maybe like community or a high trust society or any of these other issues that are actually at the root of the thing, So is giving more power to us, like a kind of satanic elite that literally engages in blood rituals, and that stuff is true. Like they literally in the Northern Ireland conflict, the British intelligence, they literally one of the things they did was they created they did setups where they created like scenes which indicated satanic rituals had taken place, and they did that to do a psyop on the Irish people that the war was unholy. It was like something unchristian about it, and officially that psyop stopped after 6 to 7 years when there were like some scandals about it where an actual girl was found dead, and officially it was like disowned by the UK intelligence services, and that's officially when it stopped. And actually, the only reason we know about this officially is because of the records that came out years later. But these actual rituals actually went on for another decade in Northern Ireland. So a lot of weird stuff happens in the government, and a lot of weird coincidences, and there is something that people feel is in power that I'm talking about people in general feel that there is a sickness in the centers of power, and that sickness has infected society, and it's at war with society. And I read, and therefore, like giving more authoritarian surveillance techniques to these people, it's a really bad idea. And in fact, what we actually need to be doing is giving more power to the people. That's so that people can right the wrongs that are being committed against them.
Amir, amazingly well said, my friend, and a nice monologue for that has some positivity in it for our future, and that it's not so bleak, and that there is an opportunity to leverage our tech to push us into that future, especially as we work together and come together as a community to stop this demonic Satan worship, blood cultist nonsense that we're having to deal with. So thank you so much, my friend. All right, guys, we've gone a little over. I wanted to give Amir the space to finish his very important statement and monologue, which I thought was extremely important for this space. We have maybe 15 minutes if the speakers are good with it, where we can answer some questions. And I'm sure the guys up here are more than happy to answer your questions or to engage in a bit of a conversation. Please try to keep everything that you say somewhat succinct so we can move through this quickly and hopefully get everybody's questions in. So if you guys want to come up, right now is the time to request. And we do currently have Cairo on the stage. If you have something that you would like to add or a question, you're more than welcome. The stage is yours, my friend. Welcome.
Mic check.
You're good.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I really just wanted to echo some of the major points that I think were really important. Some of the things that Seth and Amir were saying, and the other guys as well. That the mass surveillance project we're experiencing right now is pretty much fully reliant on AI. And, given that glaring dependency, everybody talks about the asymmetric warfare between Iran and the US. Well, we kind of have our own form of asymmetric warfare. And obviously, this is not to say that anybody in here is waging war against the state. This is all hypothetical, metaphorical speaking. But the main strength that the state has in this model is the optimization that the AI provides. It gives access to massive amounts of information, camera footage, social media posts, location data, these watch lists, all these types of things that, would ordinarily be overwhelming to somebody. And it condenses it into these precise targets and objectives that they can aim for. And aside from maybe the propaganda that we face every day, it's probably the biggest shield that they have that allows the normies, the people that aren't really in this space, to have their sense of normalcy, where the government doesn't have to lock everybody up like they did during C-19, if you understand what I'm saying. If they did that again today, they would have a very big problem on their hands, so they don't want to do that. But given that the state's biggest weakness in this regard is actually time, because the AI bubble has popped. Unfortunately for them, it has popped. And they've thrown several trillions of dollars into this project, hoping to achieve their goal. They haven't reached it. They've only gotten several billions back, like 50 billion or so. And there's no telling when the effects of that will be felt worldwide. Some people estimate maybe a year or two that they have left until the entire system collapses. And what that means is completely unpredictable. But the clear result of it is that we, the people, are fighting a battle of attrition where we don't need to be faster or more optimized than Google or Palantir or Oracle or Flock. We just need to outlast them, basically. They've got a few years tops, let's say, to make their goal happen, and every single act of resistance that someone can legally take to impede their progress is actually big. And that's regardless of how small it may seem. It makes a big difference in the grand scheme of things. So my message is, I guess I'll leave it there. My message is not so much of a question. It's just a reminder to not despair over the things that we're talking about here, and to allow everybody to think soberly about what our own goals are, where we're going in the future. Because in the end of the day, when this project fails, it's going to be more of us than it is of them. They can't arrest everybody. They can't kill everybody. That's just unreasonable to expect.
I think just a quick thought around that too. I think it's a good point to bring up that a lot of what we have to do is build tools that outlast us and outlast them. Like there have been many times when governments have come and gone. They will continue to come and go. None of this is ever going to last forever. But a lot of what we can build now is we can build things that are not just physical tools that may or may not survive the destruction of the state, but now we can build digital tools, digital freedom tech that has a much better chance of surviving, even if our nation state, if our culture, whatever, ceases to exist. We can build tools that have a legacy that lives far beyond that and that are global and not just for those who happen to be in our region at the same time. So I think it's another reason for optimism, but also a reminder of like our time matters. If we spend our time focused on things like pump and dumps in the cryptocurrency space or whatever, instead of building freedom tech, we're necessarily aiding the system because we're wasting time that we could be spending on building immensely useful freedom tech. Same thing for where we spend our money, who we donate to, what projects we fund, who we give a platform to. That matters because we do have limited time, each of us individually, but also just the more of us step up and actually build, fund, and advocate for freedom tech, the faster we'll win.
Nice, well said, Seth. Agree wholeheartedly. Harry or Amir, do you guys have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just say that, there's a lot of technology to build, a lot of technology to try. Like we at NIM, we have a mixed network which tries to provide greater surveillance protection than other anonymity networks we've worked on for years, if not decades, if you count the research. And, it's very much possible. The problem is that we need to get it, people need to use it, and they need to support it. So, we try to make it easy to use NIM VPN that works in Russia and China. I've seen Cake Wallet had a great user experience in terms of migrating Zcash or Ironwood. Darkfire score is very promising, and Dark IRC has a good user experience. So we need to build these tools not just for the geeks, but for ordinary people, because ultimately, like, we're going to need many more of us to survive and even prosper in I think the coming try to start up a Logos node and just do your best with the tech we have today and help build new tech.
Yeah, well said. I think a theme, by the way, I want to try to do my best to bring about themes that we've discussed. One of them is clear. Amir mentioned it. I know that Harry talked about it. I think even Seth hinted at it. The system currently is struggling, right? The metaphor or the analogy that I always use is the Leviathan. We stuck the Leviathan with a harpoon, and the Leviathan is sounding its death knell. As it sounds its death knell, right? It sweeps its tentacles over the top of the waters to bring as many people down with it as it can. It is a signpost and a sign of the times that as the system starts to wind itself down naturally and inevitably, that it's going to try to hurt or harm as many folks as possible. This is just part of how these systems function. I mean, just look at the Roman Empire in its final days caused as much strife and harm as possible, not only to physical human beings, but through its financial system and through the harms that were distributed throughout the empire. As it collapsed, there was a huge shakeup in that whole Roman community. This goes into what Amir was saying. The languages started to change. We had new religions and cults that were emerging all around the empire. People had these novel thoughts, new ways of thinking emerged, and then of course things descended rapidly at the end of the Roman Empire. But it did create a new kind of environmental change. Not all of it clearly was for the best, but over the long term, things did ultimately improve. I do notice right away one of the thing, and we're going to get into this in the sovereignty superspace, not necessarily in this bit or the next, but the emergent parallel society movement is I think a really big piece of novel community building and also potential safe spaces and sandboxes for people to develop technology and to have this, Amir and Darkfire use this terminology of the dark forest, have this dark forest like network that protects these actors not only digitally but also physically from attack, from confiscation, and from being thwarted from the development and the engineering processes that they're trying to work on. So I do think the time that we live in a lot of ways, is unprecedented. It's novel. It the acceleration of technology in general and cultural changes are swift and uncanny, and I think it's a beautiful thing. So I only have hope. And I do want to mention, you guys should check out Jared and Peter's book, Farewell to Westphalia. They do speak to this concept of governance failures happening all over the world. And then the balance of power is shifting as governments offload and corporations offload a lot of their powers to other more local actors. And I think that there's a lot of evidence, and they marshal a lot of evidence to support those claims. Cool. So I think we have time. We'll do one more question. If it's short, maybe two. Uh, Hopefully it's succinct, and then we'll start winding the space down. So we have Joseph, I think, was next up on the stage. Welcome, Joseph.
Hi. Well, an honor here to hear you guys, especially, following Amir and Seth for a long time. They are a light in the ecosystem. I work in areas related to blockchain and especially tools for people, right? Because I think that's the main question I have. I know Harry's virtually building VPN. So my question would be, what are defensive tools, categories that you think should be built or are being built? Um, and by this, I mean no frameworks like Logos is building. I mean end user tools, right? Like a VPN, for example, it's secure. Like something like Mulvad is doing. Like in the case of Mulvad, you can go completely anonymous and pay with Bitcoin. So things like that, I would like to know suggestions, things exist, or things that should be built, right? I would love to build. I am building something right now. I've been building for a couple of years to anonymously publish secrets online and sell them for Bitcoin, for example. That's what I've been building for a while. But what else needs to be built to help people? I think we have very few hackers, very few knowledgeable, and a lot of victims who know nothing about security and know nothing about how they are being screwed. So that's my question.
Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think a lot of the shift is thinking outside of like what new protocol or new cryptography, et cetera, needs to be built. Like I think one of the few recent interesting new things, which is funnily enough kind of a recreation and improvement on an old thing, is NIMS mixnet. Like that we needed a really good solution to be able to have an anonymous network that was different in the trade-offs it made from Tor, because that layer is so important to the rest of the tooling that we can build in this space. But I think a lot of when you look at like what have been the most influential privacy tools, the most influential freedom tech over the last 5-10 years, the vast majority of it is not influential because it's some massive cryptographic breakthrough or some massive departure from what has always existed, but rather that they figure out how do we make using the tools that have already existed, the cryptography that's already existed, the ZK proofs, PGP, whatever. How do we make that something that a regular person who just wants privacy and is not a hacker, is not someone who's super hardcore, but they just want privacy? How do we make it something that they can actually use, that they can actually understand, that actually feels intuitive? And so I think a lot more of our efforts need to go into the user experience side than they do necessarily into the building block side. Now, it's obviously not to say that we shouldn't look at protocol improvements and all of these things. Like obviously there's value there, but I think oftentimes, especially those of us like always with our heads down in the space, can get caught up in how can we build the most perfect tool to fight oppression, when a lot of times what's actually needed is how do we make the existing tools something that the people actually being repressed today can benefit from. So I think that's a lot of the shift. I mean, clear examples to me like Proton. I know they're not perfect, but they essentially made something that allows everyone to use PGP. You could look at Signal, who their underlying protocol, well, novel when they released it, is not anything that is insane, but they built a tool around it that makes it so that my grandma can use Signal and love using it. And I think that has to be a lot of the shift for us who are actually building in this space is how do we take the things that already exist? Because we essentially have all the building blocks we need for almost any kind of freedom tech that I could possibly think of. But how do we take those and actually build something useful out of them that can get real people who just right when they wake up and experience, like, okay, I need something different. The tool is ready and waiting for them.
Well said. So in order to respect everyone's time here, we're going to have to close up. My apologies as the host for going. We went over, but I was definitely not going to stop Amir and that amazing monologue and information session that he had for you guys. This is the first space that we're doing of the Sovereignty Super Space. The plan is that we do this space once a month, and the organizations and the organizations representatives that we have on the stage right now will be continuing to join us, and we're going to bring you guys news, thoughts, information, technologies that help bolster your own knowledge of the privacy space, of the parallel society space. And we should 100%, if you didn't get your question in today, please show up next time, and I'll make sure. So I see we have Jeremy on the stage. If you're here next time, Jeremy, we'll make sure to get you on the stage first for your questions and your thoughts, just so that I'm thinking about you, my man. Because what the plan is, the last Tuesday of each month we will do this sovereignty space at the same time, but it may be, of course, different folks each time, so that we can respect everyone's time. But I am thankful that we're doing this for the first time, because this has been on our minds at Logos to build out this community like this in a way that's cohesive for a long time. Like, we've been thinking about it for a few years, but we really wanted to develop the relationships a bit further. We wanted to make sure that everybody was comfortable doing it, and that folks wanted to get out here and talk. And I don't think we see a problem with that, because we are trying to build a better future. All the technologies that we're working on are going to contribute, or intended to contribute to this better future, so that we can protect ourselves both in terms of our individual privacy, our individual sovereignty and autonomy are all top of mind as we conduct this space, and as we figure out how to push into a better, brighter future. Because this is the thing, we do have this community, we do have the tech. We just need to bring it all together, and we need to make it known that we are developing this, and that we won't submit to practices that infringe on our personal liberty and sovereignty. We have to protect it at all costs, especially given the current dire circumstances that we're in right now. So thank you guys so much. This is going to be the end of the Sovereignty Superspace. I do want to let Chair, if he has any announcements or anything that I forgot, to mention it here at the end as we close up. We appreciate all of your attendance. We appreciate all the OGs who were in this space since the beginning, who care about this technology, who care about these organizations. Reach out to us, please, if you need anything or require any kind of assistance. All right, Chair, I think we're good to go. Thank you guys so much. If Chair, feel free to take us out with any additional information, or especially maybe want to mention Basecamp.
Yeah, well, first of all, check out DarkFi, check out NIM, check out Cake Wallet, and check out logos.co. Download Basecamp, run a Logos node via Basecamp, run a Logos node via the command line. Follow everyone on stage, and we'll see you for the next Sovereignty Superspace 1 month from now. Thank you, everyone, very much.
Thanks again, Amir, Harry, Seth. Really appreciate your time. Cheers, guys.
See you later, guys. Good call. Adios.